My mother-in-law is a lunatic who believes I should have ended up with my brother-in-law. Rundown. Brother-in-law and I were friends in high school. Brother-in-law got a crush on me. I didn't reciprocate. He took it badly. In college, I started dating his older brother who also attended that college. I feel some blame can fall on me here because I knew how brother-in-law felt and I ended up with his older brother. But that's just how it goes at times. I didn't intend for it to happen. Brother-in-law told mother-in-law a very different story than what the truth was. Outings with me and my group of friends in high school were one-on-one dates according to brother-in-law. We were highly S according to brother-in-law. Basically, he told her we were the OTP of the world and we'd be together forever. It didn't work out that way. Mother-in-law accused me of a lot of things when I started dating my now husband, and eventually had to step back because of how many people backed my version of events up. Shockingly, the truth has witnesses. Years passed. Brother-in-law has always made me and dear husband feel uncomfortable, and so we don't see him that much. We see mother-in-law twice a month at most, so she has supervised playtime with the kids. She even once asked dear husband if he'd be open to sharing me with brother-in-law at one point. It was a rough few years. Last visit with mother-in-law ends up coinciding with brother-in-law being there. We push on with formalities and dear husband steps out for a smoke, leaving me to supervise dear son and dear daughter while mother-in-law plays with them on the floor. Dear son is old enough to call brother-in-law Uncle Bill. Dear daughter is still going through her first words. I get up for a few moments to leave the teacups in the kitchen, and I get back to see her holding dear daughter up to brother-in-law and saying, "Say hi to daddy, say hi to daddy." He was playing along and making faces at her. The only reaction I had was to grab the kids and leave while they protested. I explained why we were rushing out to dear husband in the car, and he was really upset. He called mother-in-law to find out what the hell she was up to, and she just got very defensive about me not hearing correctly. Dear husband lied and said he'd heard it as well, and she stuttered that she was just letting the children know the truth. Their daddy was brother-in-law. Dear husband was being stupid by not realizing I was cheating on him and being taken in by my charms so I could bag both brothers. We're putting both of them on a timeout, and mother-in-law is not happy that her twice-monthly grandma visits are canceled for the next 4 months. My 38-year-old sister demanded that parents force me to sell them my house for her to live in without me. I wish I were making this up. My sister has always been extremely selfish and entitled and probably has narcissistic personality disorder, since she appears to legitimately believe no one loves her unless they're doing outrageous things for her. She did live in my house for about a year before I kicked her out for many reasons. She's literally convinced herself that she will die in any other home. My parents did say no to her demands on my home, thank heavens. I mean, the house is mine. They can't force me to sell it since I'm independent and they have no claim to my home. But I'm glad they're not throwing our relationship under the bus according to her whims, as they've done in the past. My sister is now furious with all of us and asked us not to contact her until she's treated like family again. Easy enough. I had zero plans of interacting with her again in any capacity. I can't even with her expectations. It's just too absurd. And I'm slightly terrified my parents will eventually cave and start harassing me to sell them my home for her sake. I have a really good relationship with them, so things have been pretty tense with my parents since I evicted my sister. They have caved to so many demands over the years. I didn't quite trust they wouldn't bully me into bending over backwards for my sister when my sister pushed, and she always pushes. Well, my sister pushed, and my parents stood their ground, and she pushed some more, and they still stood their ground. And at some point, my dad did ask me a favor regarding her. He asked me if I might consider doing a repair or other work that would make my home unlivable for my sister so that she would give up on the idea because they were sick of paying for her expensive hotel rooms. I pointed out that, at this point, I could probably fill my house with cancer and she would still demand it. Dad agreed, and we dropped the conversation. So, long story short, my parents are not caving to her demands for my home in the slightest. They are still enabling her in ways that don't directly impact me, which is not ideal, but it's also not my business, so whatever. They don't tell me how to parent my kids. I won't tell them how to parent their 38-year-old daughter. Somewhere in all of this, I had a conversation with my parents explaining that I would not tolerate future harassment for my sister's sake. They agreed to this full-heartedly. They came up for Thanksgiving and got a hotel room. They split their time between us and my sister. All conversation was healthy in nature with us, and no attempts were made to reconcile me and my sister or have us spend time together or anything. It was really nice. My parents also commented several times that they approved of the distance between us. They finally recognized the sister relationship was unhealthy for us, and they acknowledged my family looked a lot healthier without my sister in our life. Furthermore, my parents acknowledged that my sister was very irrational and needed help with her mental health. So yeah, awesome outcome for our relationships. Still crossing fingers they'll set more boundaries for themselves with my sister. But I'm beyond relieved I get to keep my relationship with my parents without suffering from my sister's unreasonable expectations, where she's not concerned, but it's a nightmare when she gets involved. I have been with my dear husband for 3.5-ish years now, and married for 2 years. We have dear daughter who is 18 months old, and I'm 15 weeks pregnant. Now my mother-in-law is a breeze compared to some of the stories I've read on here, but I'm annoyed, hormonal, and have had a bad week. So I'm going to fully introduce my mother-in-law to you lovely ladies and gents by sharing my first few memories of her and some of her more recent activities. When dear husband and I first started dating, mother-in-law and father-in-law had been separated for 6 months, and dear husband was basically no contact with his mother. Father-in-law and sister-in-law were living in the family home. Mother-in-law was in her own apartment, and dear husband was living in his own apartment, rooming with my brother, relevant later. He really didn't like to talk about it then, but I've gotten more and more of this story over time. The first time dear husband mentioned anything to me about his mother was she's a selfish bee who needs to die alone kind of thing. Long story short, mother-in-law and father-in-law separated after mother-in-law was caught by sister-in-law naughty texting another man. And not just any man, she was trying to have a relationship with sister-in-law's very recent ex-boyfriend that had previously spent time living in their home. Mother-in-law and father-in-law eventually reconciled and did end up getting back together within a few months of dear husband and I being together. Dear husband softened a bit, and I actively encouraged him to try fixing things with his mom if he mentioned he was considering it. The first time I met in-laws was over dinner at a local restaurant. Father-in-law and mother-in-law seemed very average and normal, and it was actually a nice dinner. Dear husband and I enjoyed ourselves, and I basically gave mother-in-law the benefit of the doubt and thought, well, maybe she just made a mistake. People make mistakes, right? The next time I met mother-in-law, we and some of her family were helping her move from her place back into the family home. She had some extra couches she wouldn't be needing now, so mother-in-law and father-in-law offered to take them to dear husband's and brother's place because their couch was falling apart and literally had cinder blocks for legs. Their apartment was on the 2nd floor, and luckily my brother is there when we pull up. He offers to help, and in his usual fashion, just hulks the couches up the stairs and down the hallway. Mother-in-law begins doing the mom feng shui thing of telling the guys where to put the couches, and my brother just drags them over to wherever she points. I didn't pick up on it at first, but I started noticing mother-in-law was laughing, kind of weird, so I started paying more attention to her. Guys, she was basically cooing, "Oh, you're so strong. Oh, you're not even sweating. Your girlfriend must be so lucky." And after every sentence, she was adding his name and giggling. Like, what the duck? Are you seriously hitting on my little brother? In front of your husband and son, who are still getting over you leaving for a different younger man? She continued to watch my little brother like she was some kind of predator hunting prey, while he moved the couch a few inches that way and then a few inches this way until dear husband finally stepped in and gave the couches their permanent spots. From that point on, I wasn't giving the woman the benefit of the doubt. She's a creep, and I haven't trusted her since. Over the past couple years, my mother-in-law has been mostly BEC, but she'll throw in a good show every once in a while. They are mostly just instances of her losing her stuff over dear husband and I doing what we wanted instead of what she wanted regarding our engagement, marriage, jobs, home, and child. In other words, every aspect of our life. She does not like me, though she'd never admit it. She tells people how she's so lucky to have me as a daughter-in-law, but she'll still throw shade anytime she gets a chance. I still encourage dear husband to see his parents if he wanted. My parents are screwy too, but I still communicate with them. I also wasn't going to be feed for any FMs on why mother-in-law's son wasn't visiting his family. We saw in-laws a couple times a week, though mother-in-law would still complain to dear husband that we needed to be more present in their family, until we went very low contact a couple months ago, due to drama becoming too much for us. There really were no major cougar behavior instances between mother-in-law hitting on my brother and now, though every once in a while she'd raise an eyebrow. Sister-in-law didn't really date for a while as well. She was still pretty hung up on the ex-boyfriend her mom romanced. Sister-in-law even tried to get back together with said ex a couple times. Why? We did have a family get-together in March where in-laws were in attendance. and both mother-in-law and sister-in-law began flirting with my uncle, my mom's youngest brother that's only about 8 years older than I. He's an over-friendly single guy that likes to talk about his world traveling, and he talked their ears off all afternoon. They really ate it up. My mom picked up on the flirting, and she was creeped out enough to bring it up to me after they left. But let's move on. A couple weeks ago, mother-in-law texts us asking for a couple $100 they had lent us over a year ago. We honestly forgot we still owed them money, and it wasn't all that much. Dear husband texted her back letting her know she could come grab the cash whenever because we probably wouldn't be out to the town she lived in for a few days. Mother-in-law texts back thank you and that they really need the money because they are going to lose their car, possibly their house, and pretty much just started text crying on my dear husband's shoulder. We did end up offering to take the money that night, but confusingly, she turned that idea down. We went over to their house with the money a couple days later and hung around for maybe an hour to let dear daughter play. It was tense. Father-in-law was friendly enough. He got down and into the toy box with dear daughter right away, and he even asked how I was feeling and how doctor's appointments are going so far. Sister-in-law, on the other hand, kept bringing up the repossessed car and trying to actively plan on how they were going to go pick it up. And mother-in-law was fuming. She kept trying to get my sister-in-law to stop talking about it, but sister-in-law was not taking any hints. By the end of our time there, I probably could have roasted marshmallows over mother-in-law's head. It really is a bad situation for them to be in, and I would have felt bad for them if they hadn't spent money on a cruise and a couple musical concert tickets this past winter while sister-in-law and father-in-law weren't bringing in income. They could have spent that money on paying the bills and getting their other 2 cars into a reliable condition, but I digress. After we left, dear husband and sister-in-law were texting back and forth. She wanted to borrow one of our cars, but between work and daycare schedules, we really couldn't give one up. I did end up blabbing to one of my aunts about what was going on, and she offered one of her cars because she is a freaking saint. I tell dear husband to text mother-in-law about the idea, and we wait to hear back. Only dear husband was dumb and didn't hear me specify mother-in-law and texted sister-in-law, who relayed the info. There was a fight. According to sister-in-law, it was a big one. Mother-in-law had set up a FM to go with father-in-law to pick up their car. Father-in-law had planned on going with sister-in-law, and chaos ensued. Somehow, it comes out that mother-in-law is texting sister-in-law's ex-boyfriend from all that time ago again. And I guess the fight ended, or sister-in-law lost her stuff because we weren't getting as many texts. I mean, it freaking sucks for father-in-law, sister-in-law, and dear husband. But how stupid can this woman be? The same freaking guy? From dear husband's point of view, the guy is scum who can't keep jobs and mooches off of anyone he can. So why? We have pretty much cut all contact with mother-in-law now. Dear husband was already getting pretty pissed because his mother hasn't asked about dear daughter or us in a while. Sister-in-law has been the only one who has consistently asked about how we are the past few months. Surprising given her mental history. But we do give father-in-law a pass because he hasn't had access to a phone, didn't pay his bill. Don't know what's happened since that fight. We have been so busy, and dear husband recently took on a part-time job in addition to his full-time gig. I do know sister-in-law is getting ready to relocate out of state for a new job. And father-in-law is back working. He's self-employed, but winter is a super slow time for him. I have no idea what is going on with mother-in-law right now, and I would say it has been magical, but I know my dear husband is hurting. I don't think he wants any additional details of what happened. From the way he talks, he sounds like he's just done. He's even mentioned he was thinking about possibly talking his dad into another separation. It was brought up, even during the in-laws' early reconciliation, that father-in-law seemed much happier alone by both dear husband, sister-in-law, and other family. So, we shall see what happens.